All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming in and welcome. Today we have Robert
Hello. I'm a game designer and programmer.
and Efren.
Good afternoon. I'm level designer and 3D modeler.
So let's get started on the roundtable for today. So yesterday we started talking about the operator and how the new ones coming in and everything that's being implemented with that. How is that going so far?
Okay, so when it comes down to the operator, we decided to basically take it in little bite-sized chunks of just, getting the base of the movement, the camera, the rotating in place, really, really solid. And then we're going to move on to the attachments for the vehicles and add a little bit more air control. So it's a little bit more similar to Fortnite in terms of like you can actually control what direction you're going in. Because if you play the experimental we released yesterday, you just kind of jump off a building, you just fall straight down. Like you just parachute straight down. You have no air control. So we're kind of trying to squeeze that in as we're working on the other RTS aspects, as we're working on the performance, which has been one of the biggest pushes this week. But yeah, we think that in the next, I would say, because that's where I finish this AMA, I'm gonna go work on them some more and hit an energy drink. Is my goal is to basically finish that out tonight, a majority of them, maybe some remnants tomorrow, and then hopefully by like Friday to Monday, the operator will be like. But the other thing that probably might still be lacking is the attachment system because we want to be able to attach. We want to be able to expand the operator so he could use weapons of other classes that obviously increases the amount of work we have to do and basically make sure that everything works, all the attachments look right, and how they affect the balance of the game. So the attachment system is the only thing where me and Michael are just kind of coming back and forth. We're like, maybe we should push this off another week or two just so we have more time to plan it out, figure out how it's going to work, and then introduce it just on its own as one of the last things that we push into experimental sometime next week before we merge everything into the normal build. But yeah, that's everything I got on that.
All right. Another thing too. I saw the gift that you sent me. Um, it's also being also
I'll post it in
adding
the channel.
dismemberment.
Yeah, so a couple of the guys have been just kind of like playing around in the corner of trying to figure out how we could add dismemberment because the blow up guy raised the question is like, okay, like we could do this, how do we scale this up to more people? So that was like a quick little dirty prototype that we put together last night in the eat hours to just like at 5 a.m. to basically see if we could blow up someone's arm, blow off someone's leg, have their head come off, like that kind of stuff for the CERC and for the standard infected. So we have a prototype version of it, and we're going to probably work on it on the back end here and there over the next week or so. And then if everything comes to fruition and everything works and it's perform it, we'd introduce it for the standard infected initially. Because in that way, like when you shoot them, their arm will come off when they die. Like they'll just grab their arm and nothing's there. Or their leg will come off and they'll trip over themselves and fall. Their head will be blown off if, like, for whatever reason, one of the bullets hits the head and it's a certain caliber. It's like those kind of things, like the giving kind of deal. And then eventually that could segue into basically having it to where we could affect them live in the engine of like you shoot off a leg and they'll still hop at you with the other leg or they'll fall on the ground and start to crawl. Because it's been something for our team is trying to like as we hopefully like the animation side was caught up and they're getting everything situated, they're starting to go off into the corner and just R&D other ways that we could add more life attention to detail and life to the characters in the world so they're more believable of like everything is like has a reaction, everything is like visceral in terms of like you shoot someone, it's something always happens, even just physical animation is something that we're talking about on the back end. So when you shoot people or whatever, they actually have like they kind of move a little bit. There's a little bit of an impulse applied to the character instead of just relying always on an animation. It's dynamic and it takes it based off of the force that was applied to the character and that kind of stuff. Um, And then we're also looking into replacing the get up animations with a more dynamic system. That basically would allow them to they can jump off a building and fall on the ground, and they'll know how to dynamically get back up, like in Red Dead or GTA, for example. Like their physics system, obviously not to their level of sophistication because they have a proprietary physics engine they use for that, but using some of the engine features to leverage. Oh, look, they can fall off an object. They can walk over a vehicle, and sometimes they'll fall, and then they'll dynamically get up and run at you. And just short level buildings and all that. Jumping over a fence, and they might fall every once in a while, just to add that little nuance of just immersion. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. What we're trying to do with the animation over the time.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. It's going to be a very unique sort of thing to see when that comes out.
Uh-huh.
Efren, you were telling me yesterday as well. Yeah, you were working on more on San Francisco North, finishing fleshing out the streets and whatnot. How is that going so far? We may have lost
Maybe he's
Efren.
dead, or maybe he's having mic issues.
Yeah, I think we're having technical issues with Efren.
Oh, he muted his mic. Yeah, he is having technical issues. I guess come back to me. Our question,
Okay.
and then whenever he fixes it, he can just butt in.
Yep.
Oh, did you want me to give an overview of everything we've been working on this week to stall for Efren?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so as many of you know, we've had an ongoing issue with the game's performance. So I mentioned last week that we're going to be basically really extensively just hammering down into what can we do better to improve the user experience of. I guess the argument was internally is the game does have quite a few bugs. We think that people will be a little more accommodating if the game ran at always 30 to 60 frames minimum to give us more time to fix all the bugs and to find all the bugs. So we've kind of really extensively been just going through and finding out that a lot of the cost that we have for the game has been coming from the UI. Like the UI has been eating up in some cases 40 frames, 50 frames. So it was one of those things where we had to do a lot of research and a lot of R&D of okay, how do we do this for an RTS game? Because the engine isn't necessarily made for RTS games. So we were able to squeeze out quite a bit of frames. We were able to use some newer ways of benchmarking the game to essentially highlight areas of the widgets and highlight areas of just widgets UI, the slate that were causing people to basically just eat frames, no matter nothing, even if nothing's going on in the scene, like the mini map, the group icons, the icons that we draw in the world. Basically not having to redraw every frame and adding invalidation and special containers that bring that down. So that was a lot of research, a lot of R&D to figure out what works and what doesn't based off of every game's different. And some things that work in some cases for some games don't always work for all of them. We still need to apply that to the main menu because then that would increase the frame rate on the main menu. Because theoretically, it's being redrawn every tick, every frame. So theoretically, that's why frame rates are kind of low on the main menu at times, is because we haven't invalidated and kind of done that optimization pass on the main menu. Our goal is yesterday and today, is to finish up the rest of the slate optimization because we think that we could squeeze out another 20 to 40 frames depending on your computer hardware and to have no compromise to the visual fidelity and what you're actually looking at based off of just really precise tweaking of just how often a unit a UI element can tick, update, populate, that kind of stuff visually, not on the back end. Because yeah, and then because that even then that doesn't update that often unless it's taking bullet damage for a health bar. And those are all events. And then we've been looking into the particle effects. We've been looking into, objects that have tick on that shouldn't have tick. And, from what I've seen, at least, from what people have been posting, a lot of people have gained, I went from 40 to 50 frames in high combat to 80 to 90 with my 3080 and an i7 10th generation. So, and other people have gotten as much as 20 to 30 to 40 frames regardless in most situations. There's still some hedge cases where it goes off the rails later in the game. So again, our goal is to leave 1.1 successfully we have to be able to guarantee 60 frames on recommended and 30 frames on minimum at all times on the Steam hardware. So Steam hardware, like stuff we have there on the store page. So that's what we're doing, and we're hoping to get to that point by next week. And then obviously we're going to try and push it further, because in the editor we're pushing 90, but in the cook game we push like 60. It's just to kind of like, if it runs better in the editor, it'll typically run double better, if that's not a word, in a cook build, because it's not as raw in terms of like all the systems aren't optimized as well when you're running it in the editor. So those are all things that we're just really, really extensively getting at. And then our goal is hopefully by next week we can transition into getting the medium Atlas tower in, getting a new weapon like window in, because the weapon window we have now doesn't really explain. So a lot of people come to us and they're like, Michael, Robert, these guns, why do they have the same damage? Base damage sometimes. It's because we have a damage fall off system. So even though the base damage is at that, it's approximating it or normalizing it from a graph. So sometimes they just happen to show the same display number, but like the scar completely devastates every other rifle, because of over range, it has the highest per damage on the bullet when you shoot, is an example. And then some other guns might have the same number, but they fall off quicker, is the idea. Same thing with this. Every gun has this system, and we're going to basically be doing like a division type of like graph. So when you highlight a weapon or you go to it, it'll display the damage fall off for the guns, shotguns, everything. So then that way you have all the information you need, and it'll also show the damage graph for silencers, so people can understand, like when they attach a silencer, there is a trade-off in terms of right now silencers are just broken because in fact they just don't know what to do. So that's something we're looking into as well, as adding a damage graph. So when a gun is silenced, it basically would just lower the damage a little bit quicker, just for balance's sake. Let's see. And that's pretty much everything that we're just kind of working on, we're discussing, and we're doing at this current moment. And then Efren, is your mic working?
No, it looks like it is.
He said something a
definitely-
second ago.
He did say something a second ago, but I think it's.
Well, I'll just jump in for what I know of. As far as I know, from what he's been reporting in the channel, is that he's been basically going in and really, really just nailing down the final details of some of the landscapes, the building layouts, making sure that he has a good vista or a good blockout asset that represents all of the weedies or vistas that they generally call it in game design. Weedies is a term that was coined by Disney that basically is the idea, it's like landmarks that you basically look at to associate where you are in the world, like unique buildings, essentially weedies. And that's basically what he's doing. And the game designers, we just kind of adopted it, kind of jumping back here. And essentially it means that, like, okay, he's putting in like the unique buildings of like the long rectangular building that has a park on top. We were playing around with the idea of, should we at least put in the subway entrances now? So then that way, when we get to the point of along the prototype underground travel, of getting back and forth between all the islands by actually going down there with a convoy and driving to the tunnels, or taking a crew and going down to the tunnels to clear it out. If Chelsea's down there, you can. Those are the things that we're all talking about and we're discussing it, because a big thing is that once we build San Francisco North, I want to have the landmarks laid out of like where, more not the landmarks, but rather the subway entrances, so we can actually connect all the islands. And then that way, there's a way for Chelsea to get around outside of just blow all the bridges, GG. Now you actually have to like block that out, or just kind of find some way of like, you have a security team down there that basically they can go to the tunnels and sneak from Treasure Island to San Francisco North if you don't have a team down there guarding it with checkpoints or turrets as like a system to let you know, oh, if they're going to be overwhelmed, we should go down this entrance and reinforce the position. It's something we've wanted to do. So it's a kind of a wish list system. So like we're going to basically just build the locations of the subway entrances, make sure they're to scale, make some entrances that vehicles can enter that are just like old train tracks that are just like on the ground level. So you can like enter it at a different junction, and you have to go further to catch up where the infantry would enter further down the line, and have those systems there, but they'll be blocked off, so you can't go down there yet. until we have the resources and the time to develop those tunnels, that network. But on the above side, again, it's the weedies, it's the designing the rooftops, making sure the collision's good for the blockouts, making sure there's enough diversification to the buildings so they're not too samey. In terms of like right now, we're just doing like the Skyrim approach where you just reuse a table as many goddamn times as you want to kind of get the idea of the gameplay space, and then like after we get to the point of playtesting it, then we come back in the second layer, and we basically just spruce it up, add more like variations so it pops more, essentially. And again, San Francisco North is like one of the largest spaces we've ever built. It's approximately all the islands put together, or always like barely half of it. So it's like literally like a urban city. Like it's massive. So there's so many spaces that Efren's going through, and he's just kind of populating and putting the cars in, setting up the spawners. Because he came to me yesterday and he was like, "Can we put this in? Because I want people to play it." And I'm like, "There's so many things going on right now that we're gonna have to probably wait a week until we can have a beta opt-in. So when you go to custom game options, you can choose, hey, I want to test San Francisco North. I want to play on that. I don't care it's untextured." So then that way they can go and they can give us feedback of like, oh, I like these areas. This area is kind of weird. This area has bad collision. This is too empty, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So the idea is we're going to get to that point in the next week or so where people can just opt in from the custom game options and just load that area up and test it out. And then that way, like, boom, now you have an entire area where Chelsea and the other people will randomly spawn at, and the entire map just triple in size in terms of the space. And the good thing is that by testing in that small little area, we can start to see what systems are going to be stretched bare, so we can basically reallocate resources from the AI, from the movement components, and make sure everything's balanced in terms of the overall performance of the game as we expand and push more into virtualization. All right, so that's everything I got. 'Cause I think I filled in much as I could for Efren. Back to you, Derivar.
Yeah, that's all right. So we were also talking about yesterday that you were cleaning up the animations to improve the tick rate, and that a new, well, not really a new type of infected, but the new look of the infected is coming.
Yes, that's in our experimental now. Is that this is what I mean by like the roadmap is sometimes if someone's really, really ahead, like Michael, he'll just go way ahead. And he'll just start testing and getting seats, like, basically getting stuff operational from like cosmetic stuff that just needed to be done. So like he's going and he's putting in the new lieutenants now. He's going in and he's putting in the new standard infected, which are already in. And they look really good. They're like photorealistic characters. The only thing that we had to like compromise on was their hair quality for an RTS game because they were just too high poly. So we had to decimate them and lower them down a little bit. But otherwise, they're their original raw, like really high poly character, but with really aggressive mods. So the moment you pull out, it calms down. And it's like, okay, now it's 10K. Now it's 5K, like League of Legends. When you're playing an RTS. But if you zoom all the way in, they're photorealistic and they are detailed. Um, and then on top of that, he's been going in and he's been redoing all the animations from the ground up from our original mocap data that we did from 3 months ago when it came down. And then just animation packs and stuff that people give out for resources that for us to basically just kind of pull from and edit at the same time. So like we've been trying to fix that stupid effect that the infected do. They kind of like discombobulate when they melee. They come apart like the chest up because there's this weird like blend going on. So like we've been pushing the animation, we've been pushing those characters and pushing aggressive LODs to just kind of make sure that computers can actually run the game. So that way it's not loading like the raw assets like 40K when you're all the way up. It only loads it when you're in cinematic mode right on their face. And then what else? I mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing, which is basically just really pushing the new characters, and then the new operators. Sorry, not the operators. The new like lieutenants. 2 of them should be in the next week or so, because we ran into some like issues here and there. And then we're putting in the new Winters and the new Chelsea sometime after that. And then we started working on the newer scientists. I'll post a concept. We'll probably have something character modeling wise, like probably like something to show at the gray box probably in about a couple weeks. Because generally our characters for our character modelers take about 2 to 3 months to make a character, and we put that on pause recently just because of just budget stuff. We had to just kind of focus more on like what we were doing in this moment, because with the summer sale it kind of helped out for being able to, kind of get another more characters on the pipeline down the lane. And then you can see an example of what I posted in podcast text. That's the new scientist that we're working on. That'll replace the scientist in game right now. Obviously the concept, whenever you have a concept and then you take it to concept to like a model, something's changed, because not everything can just be one-to-one to the concept. Typically no character model is just that good. So, but that's generally the idea that we're going in for him. And then we'll be pushing that he has the highest immunity towards the infection. Michael's been tweaking that as well behind the scenes. So then that way, like when you like get hit, they're kind of so covered, they're already like good to go. And then we'll be also pushing it for them in the future where when we do the DNA research screen, which is being designed as we speak, then we'll have it to where because we got, I don't know, I think Tara, messaged me on DMs actually. He was asking about what happened to the flashlights and the gas masks. And myself, Michael, and Derek got together. We're like, this is kind of stupid. They have to buy it, and they're a government agency that fights biological weapons. So we bake that into the core so that when you just start, you have the flashlight and you have the gas mask unlocked by default. And what we want to do with that is when you go into gas like zones that are heavily, heavily contaminated, like in Division, for example, they'll have a timer that runs on them. And it shows up like, hey, you have 5 minutes. If you're not out of this zone in 5 minutes, you're just going to start taking infection damage. And then when they get full, when the infection damage goes to 0, they're infected, and they're going to start turning on your guys. And the idea is that the scientist will have the largest tank because he has a closed system. And then everyone else would have like little rebreathers for just more so budget reasons, if we couldn't afford to make new heads for everyone. And essentially just they have their own timers, and you can increase that as you gather more DNA, as you understand more of the virus. You can increase the resistance that system has for filtering out the contaminants. So then that way they can stay in the zone longer. So going into a gas zone is like, oh, that's so cool. Look at the effects. But there's no gameplay ramifications for them. The virus isn't actually a threat to your units. So that way, the idea is you'll run into some really interesting gameplay scenarios where, like, you go into an area, you're going to attack, you're going to destroy a gas tower, and you get pinned down, the timer's running down, you got to get a helicopter over there to get them out because they only have like 40 seconds or something until they start to asphyxiate or get infected or whatever. And then that way, it creates these really cool dynamic moments in terms of the storytelling. The storytelling you can't write down, the storytelling that happens as you play the game. Which is my opinion the best way. Anyway, that's all I got for that, Durivar. Back to you. I kind of went off on a rant. Durivar, die too?
Check 1, 2.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Oh my god.
Durivar, you there? Oh, you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had my mic muted. So now that we have Efren, would you like to go into a bit more detail on what you've been doing with San Francisco North, like with the streets and whatnot?
All right, so San Francisco North pretty much finished laying out the streets last week, replacing all the block out roads, placing in the final static meshes. This week I got started doing some of the cleanup work for the spaces where, all the buildings and the properties are going to go, kind of planning out, looking at Google Earth and some of our reference images from our trip to plot out where, which buildings, which areas look good for like players to traverse through, what would be a good spot to make areas for like the third person view. Also, since we had to diminish the size of the map by like about 50%, I kind of have to look at the map and really decide which landmarks I want to put in. A lot of what I'm doing right now is really just kind of breaking up a lot of the monotonous, and because San Francisco's got it's a sprawling urban environment. There's a lot of apartments and houses, and in between that, there are parks and stuff like that. So with very limited space, I kind of have to plan, okay, I don't want this area to look too, as Robert says, samey. So you want to break it up with other locations like parks, reservoirs, areas that players can go into and sort of explore, maybe even, interior areas, like Robert was talking about the metro rail system that we wanted to put in. I'm kind of been looking at the map and placing markers where I want to put subway entrances and where I want the tracks to run through and how I want that to be incorporated into the other islands. So I kind of have to compromise having something that we can put into the game level, but also make it so that it doesn't intrude too much above ground, so making it so that, we can build a separate underground area with the rail system and also have it come up overground at some locations like San Francisco on the East Coast on the Inner Bay coast. Usually it comes up out of the ground and travels all along the coast where the piers are at, under the bridge and whatnot. And then it turns around and goes back the other way. And the train takes off somewhere else. I don't know where exactly, but we're going to have to find that out. And then just kind of, organizing the buildings, even though everything's just gray boxes right now, kind of looking at the map, see which kind of buildings I want to put into the skyline, what I'm going to have to leave out due to the limited amount of space that we have, and just making the space playable, kind of taking into consideration both the RTS and the third person aspect of the game.
You know what's funny, my friend? I just realized that when we went out there with Miles, we probably should have just written the BART all over the place. And then just came up with the subways. We should have written like the actual BART. I just realized that we probably should just it seems kind of silly, and we probably should just got on at one train stop and just wrote it all over the city. And just took pictures and videos that way as let's park the car somewhere. Because that'd be helping you out now for designing the tunnels and everything.
There are other locations too that I wish we would have gotten, like Coit Tower.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on that hill that I would have liked to looked at, but I'm kind of improvising with it with images from online. Because at first I thought it was only one way down, but then they have all these like side trails and hiking trails and stairways that go up there from different sides of the cliff. So I've been kind of incorporating that because, we want the infected to find their way up there with more than one path to use. So a lot of that too, it's like kind of considering having these attacks coming from all directions, making every space pretty much accessible from as many directions as possible. So the players are constantly on their toes and they don't know where these things are going to come in from.
I mean, the thing is that we could always in the future try and like go out there for another day or two just to grab some of the spots that we just didn't know existed. So that's always something we got to try and figure out in the future is see if we need to like scout it out one more time just to get more of like, because there's like 2 or 3 locations that my sister told me about that was like I wasn't aware of that exist there, but theoretically like she is the person that like knows that area should have probably have like tour guided us to kind of be like here and here and there. You want to get these because these are like the really really unique area. So if we do it again, which hopefully we can, we could theoretically grab my sister and then she'll show us around to just kind of figure out like all the cool stuff. But yeah, stuff we missed at least. But
Underground Mall either.
Oh yeah, go.
I don't think we saw the Underground Mall either.
We did not.
Because that would be like bad.
Yeah, like we missed like we didn't know that So like we probably have to do it again, honestly. Before the city is like fully polished up and before we do like the final block out the next couple months, we'll probably have to go out there for another day or two just to make sure that before we get everything right. Anyhow, back to you, Deliver.
So to finish up the roundtable and move on to community questions. Lastly, you mentioned that you were adding the ability to control the groups, the teams, from the operator mode. I actually forgot to mention that part.
Yes, I love Freedom Fighters and the original Ghost Recon games. So like when I was going in there and converting it over from the first person to the third person and trying to build a really good foundation, so it's really easy to replicate and do the whole co-op in the future for them. A big thing for me was like, why don't we just allow them to control any group they want? So I went in there and tore up some of the extra code that was made for the first person operator, and I just made it work so that way, like, you could use the number keys where you're in the operator to select a group, and the little text that comes up is a whip. But we'll get some of the concepts something soon. And the idea is you can now choose group 2, and you can legitimately just tell him, hey, I want you guys in that group to go over here. If you got a whole team of little birds, you can tell every one of those little birds to follow you from the air and cover a ground army. So, like, and the quick test that I did when I was playing it the other night, I would have like 2 or 3 little birds of like fully loaded out like assault and heavies, and then I would have like a ground squad, and then I would be ordering the people on the little birds to move around, provide cover support for the people that were on the floor. Well, then I was basically covering the flanks, looking for areas where they were trying to sneak past in the third person mode. And then the cool thing is that most people don't realize this, and we need to add more visual feedback, is you can actually order a group to directly attack someone. So if you press the up arrow while you're looking at someone, it will actually order that group to attack that unit. The same thing as if you would right click them. So I was like, well, I don't want to make it so you can only just do everything with the one group you're in. So I guess the natural evolution of that would be going into the future when we have time, is make it to where you could switch the group that's selected on the far left. So when you choose a group, you could see their health bars, or you can see their data when you press 1 through 9. It'll select them in the world, so you can see units' health and their infection level by looking at them. And then essentially we're trying to build a really good foundation for people who don't want to play the RTS aspect. They can meet their friends halfway for playing in the third person, and they can just play as squads or groups of people in co-op, while other people are playing in RTS to work together towards a common goal when we get to the point of implementing co-op. That's the biggest thing of like pushing these systems. And myself and Michael would like to squeeze in some kind of mercenaries mode where you can play with your 4 friends in like a small little space that we built with your operator. So that way, theoretically, you could grind them out XP and then carry over that operator to RTS or carry it over to your co-op games. It's been like kind of like a secret pet project that me and Michael have been dabbling with in the corner of like replicating the operator and then seeing if we can like get him as like one of the first things he could play in some kind of co-op aspect of like, hey, you could play around with your friends in a small little map and grind out your operator with your friends, and then that'll slowly but surely link into the full progression of the full RTS being replicated. Because it's like a stepping stone for us of like small little baby steps of replicating the entire game, learning what works really well, and then scaling it up for the grander stuff for RTS. It's going to be trial and error, regardless, when we get to that point. Um, that's something we've been talking about internally for myself and Michael. Um, let's see. What else is there, Jeremy? Anything else you want me to hit upon?
I think that's covered everything for the roundtable. Let's move on to community questions, shall we?
All right. All you do,
So
Mark.
covering a previous question asked by John Connor that we didn't cover last podcast. They ask thoughts on water amphibious vehicles. Any vehicles specifically in mind when or if they might we might see them, along with that possible aquatic infection types.
So that's kind of like, at this point, that's going to be beyond 1.4, 1.5 in terms of basically when we plan to kind of implement more of aquatic stuff. Our goal right now is at that point, we'd have to figure out, do you want to do that before the co-op or after the co-op? And then you figure, because like we want to get the game to a very solid foundation before like and implement all like the co-op and the modding. So we're not constantly breaking people's stuff in terms of the modding aspect of the game. Um, so I mean, I would have to guess that's probably like aquatic combat, like all the I forget the name, the Zodiac, all that stuff is probably at least like 8 months out at least. Because like right now, if you look at our roadmap on the null page, there's already so much that we have to do just to kind of get everything where it needs to be. Um, so yeah, we are thinking about aquatic combat. We are thinking about like getting more infected that can actually swim and whatnot. But it's just not in not in the immediate future, but later down the road. Oh, that's an error. Sorry.
That's up. Okay, so we got someone here by the name of Gamer Tom. They've been patiently waiting with their hand up.
Did you raise them?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I was about to do subway idea though. That's a big good idea for effect to get through one place to the other very quickly. But my opinion about it is that what if we blow up the subway to slow them down? Will it affect the other factions like the police and the other factions that was broken?
Oh, you're talking about the other factions being able to get through like your borders?
Yeah, like using the subway tunnel.
I mean, the idea is equal opportunity for everyone. So it wouldn't just be the infected. It'd be anyone that can physically fit down there would know that's an alternate option to traverse the level. Yeah.
Yeah, because my opinion is about what happens if you decide to blow up the train tunnel instead. What will happen? Will it change the battle?
Uh, there are no plans right now to blockade the train tunnel itself. I'm pretty sure we'll probably get to that point eventually, of just naturally just as it evolves as we develop it. But I mean, that theoretically that could be a viable option if we go that route of having it to where you can cause a cave in or something like that. So that way you can close off viable routes. But again, the biggest thing is that the factions will have helicopters to get back and forth between the islands. And then they'll be rare, but they will have them to sneak behind enemy lines. And then the infection, we're looking at having emergence tunnels or tunnels that the Leviathan digs to essentially not necessarily attack and sneak behind your lines, but you'll basically be able to see them tunneling, and then you'll be able to attack them while they're tunneling on the map. But the idea is that you can like see it way in before, and you can counter it instead of like, oh look, there's a tunnel coming, and I can't do anything until he arrives to his destination. So those are all kind of like systems that we're looking at to essentially like make sure that you blow up all the bridges, you add the tunnels, and you destroy those too. It's not GG, and then you can just sit in one corner of the map and just tunnel for the rest of the game, and then just send in attack teams with no real consequence to yourself anymore. So the biggest thing is just trying to kind of balance out that juggling act and making sure that it's not just stagnates into just you can't lose anymore. It's like the tactic right now is leaving Winters on the aircraft carrier. We're going to counter that eventually by having it to where the aircraft carrier can come under attack. Is that kind of stuff. So like those are all things that we're aware of our player tactics, and we want to make sure there's no like it's like the building climbing thing, where it's like eventually they're going to be able to climb the buildings and run up them to make it to where like there's no real safe space. What's up?
Well, I was gonna say that because when I played World War Z on the Xbox, I know the survivors can use those working trains to defend themselves.
Yeah. There's no plan to have trades this time because you figure like it is well with pretty much those are just going to be empty or they'll be derelict or just decommissioned or turned off, and they'll just probably just be dressing in the subway tunnels if I were to guess at this point. But currently, there's no plans for that yet. Yeah, right now.
Alrighty then. Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, Derivar, pick another.
Right, Ace Hunter has had their hand up.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So first things first, I have two questions, but one thing. When you said zombies that can swim, my mind immediately went to Resident Evil, and I think you know the exact enemy I'm referring to.
Resident Evil 4? The one in the water? The lake?
I was referring to the zombie sharks, but sure, that
Oh,
one
yeah,
too.
those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Thank
What
you.
about it? Sorry.
You've made my nightmares manifest, but that actually leads into my question: are we going to just see like some zombies that can just swim, or is it going to be like some sort of biological phenomenon, or something actually completely unique?
No, it's not going to be the infected swimming. We originally were going to do that, but we kind of got away from that because instead we want to add transport units that are like organic monsters that do it, and then we want to give the Leviathan more of like a siege breaker unit, where essentially it's like it's like the transport towers from like Total War almost, where it loads up a bunch of infected and then it deposits them. In this case, not over a wall, but under a wall into your compound, or on another island. Well, you thought you've been safe for the last 40 minutes, but now they're gonna come a knocking. Is the idea, and then eventually we want to have it to where the Leviathan actually goes out on the water. So when we add aquatic and boat combat, he'll attack your boats. Is the idea. So that's like a long-term goal of like myself and Derek have been going back and forth on that. It'd be really cool to actually make the Leviathan a Leviathan, so that way he like kind of lives out on the water more as well, and that's like his home. Because right now he just goes under the map and sleeps all day until you piss him off. Like when you walk above him, it's a chance of waking him up, and then when you just every once in a while he'll just wake up, get pissed, and go and attack your stuff, which is like kind of random. So we're just trying to find more of a reason for him to like. He guards the seas. He, it is like a special unit that Chelsea calls in to just, look, I can't get anywhere. I'm at a stalemate. What can I do? And then she brings him over, chooses a location to invade. She'll invade faction territory, or she'll just invade your territory. Depending on whatever just to her seems the weakest. Does that answer your questions?
One more after this, but again, fuel for my nightmares. Thank you very much. But second thing, this is more of a, if you go to podcast questions, I'm going to post a small GIF there. Because I think we're all a little curious when you said naval units.
Uh-huh.
I'm hoping this works. If not, I'll just DM it.
Okay, what's the question?
If you look in podcast questions real quick, that's my question. Would we see a unit like this for naval stuff?
Oh, you mean battleships?
Yes. Because last time when you said, oh yeah, we're going to have naval units, I was just like, are we going to see the return of the Iowa?
So, when it comes to naval units, the first thing we want to do is give the ability to control the aircraft carrier. The second thing is we want to be able to give you Coast Guard ships, Zodiacs, like low to medium class like ones. I forget the actual destroyers that they use. If Chris was here, my writer, he'd go tell me exactly what name it is, but
I don't think it's a destroyer. I think it's a frigate, actually, if I remember.
I don't remember the exact classification right now, but I just know that we wanted to start adding Navy ships and like basically like medium class ships. Nothing too crazy like a battleship, but more so just like when we get to that point, which is again we're talking like 8 months out minimum, is being able to you can combat the Leviathan with those, you can conquer the sea with that. And then the factions will have like makeshift stuff. So the idea is we were drawing up and conceptualizing yachts, sailboats, and other stuff, and they will convert Mad Max style based off of their
they
faction.
slap an Abrams turret on it.
Basically.
I can see that.
Essentially, they'll take stuff from the world and make it makeshift on there. But the other idea is they would use like yachts, like those, those like. Have you seen Spider-Man: Homecoming? You know that like transport ship the transport ship that the Vulture tears apart is something like that. For instance, that the anarchists or like the police would be able to build, and they'd use that as like a ship to invade your island. So that would be like they wouldn't make it or manufacture it. They just take it from somewhere in the world, quote unquote. But because it's a whole RTS game, is the idea is we're simulating that they found one in the world. And then they're going to put people on it, put cars on it, and then send it to your island to go say hello. And that's like more of a long-term goal for us when we get to naval combat. Is now there's transport ships, now there's light ships, and there's somewhat whatever the equivalent of the medium ship is going to be that we still have to kind of figure out so they can actually do something to you. Because when you bring in more of the CERC, like heavy armament weapons, it's at that point it's like, bye. You get all they get deleted in terms of like some of the actual like U.S. military ships. So I guess it'll be interesting how that dynamic works out because you have to kind of work all that out. But I guess it kind of makes sense because we're planning on making the factions sub-factions, and that the 3 main playable factions that we're aiming for are going to be Chelsea, CERC, and then Fenrir. Because then that way they all have highly specialized units, highly specialized gear, and they play distinctly different than each other, and they actually have an end goal, and they can actually either one of them could kill the other in terms of basically like their resources. So that's something I guess theoretically it kind of works out. But did I answer your question?
Yes, but just quick thing: the moment you said just like, "Hey, yo, we're adding a Leviathan and naval ships," my first thought was Iowa. Second thought was Iowa squaring off with something several times larger with that.
Oh, I mean, do they still use that one?
No, but it is set in a retirement. It's retired, but it's pretty much if the U.S. Navy takes severe casualties, the Iowa can be brought back up to service in I think 72 hours or so.
Oh, well, there's no plans for a battleship at this time, but I'll put it on the fan wish list.
Yeah.
In wish list.
Yeah. All right. Next one, Derivar. Oh, Michael, you want to say hello? You kind of snuck in.
Hi,
Or-
pal.
Okay. Well, that's all he has to say,
Good job.
folks. I put your flag up on the thing. On the stream. Okay. Any other questions?
So might I add before we continue is when you said Greg will just wake up and get pissed, sounds like me when I don't have my morning coffee. I wake
That
up,
sounds
get
like
pissed.
everyone. We don't have our morning coffee. And for me, it's my Monster Energy drink.
For me, it's my Beppis.
Oh, I need to actually break one out because after
My
this, I gotta get
God.
started on the. Wait, what? What the Bevers?
That's
I'll tell you. Like,
breathless.
Oh, it's an Australian thing.
Oh my
We give him shit. Sorry, guys.
yes.
Anyway.
Anyway, moving on. John Connor says he forgets they forget the name of it, but have the counter building for the Leviathans to collapse the tunnels.
He's asking about countering them.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the ground poundy one. What's that one?
The
Hulk smash, Hulk angry one. Which one?
God damn, I'm having a brain fart now. The
building that keeps Greg away.
Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot the name.
The tugs.
No, he's talking about the one that hits the ground. It causes and it causes that concussion blast that scares them away.
That was the tugs. I
no,
thought that was one that, or is that for the levy?
No, that's the Leviathan basically repeller thing. I can't remember the name right now, but basically that. No, God damn it, Michael. No, and that essentially is that's gonna still be there. It's gonna get a final mesh. And then essentially, really the tactic is going to be using the attack sensors to passively find them, just like a radar thing, or to use the helicopter via a module and a weapon loadout we want to give it. Thumpers, sorry, yeah, the Thumpers. We got the reference from Half-Life 2 for the Antlion level. Love that game. A little side note there. And essentially, we want to make it to where essentially it will the Black Hawk can like send out a detection wave that'll basically find it. You can fly over an area and you can like scan the area, the seismic activity, by something it drops or hits in the ground. And then from there, you're able to like, oh, there's a Leviathan here. Oh, they're digging a tunnel. And then it'll be a weapon you can switch out on the Black Hawk that will allow it to basically it's like an airstrike call in on the Black Hawk where you choose a location, and then it would fire a missile. It'll just go through the ground tunnel and basically like attack the Leviathan. So if you chain enough, you could kill it instantly. But if you hit it, you'll wake it up, or rather you'll piss it off, and then it'll come up and say hello. So at that point, you got to kill it before it emerges to begin with, or you have to just fight it when it comes up. Because then now you can kind of like kill it when it's sleeping. Because most people don't realize this, and I know I mentioned this a lot in the AMAs, is that the Leviathan doesn't actually despawn. He goes under the map and he just goes to sleep. If you don't kill him in time, and he's just annoyed, he's like, whatever, I'm done. He'll just go under the map and randomly just go to sleep, and then when you walk over him, you can wake him up. Make too much noise, you can wake him up. Or if Chelsea calls upon him, and then he goes out there and he basically decides to wreck your nicely built constructions all over again, which is why he's turned off so goddamn often on the custom game option. So we're trying to essentially counteract that so people don't want to turn it off. And it's a fun, interesting twist in terms of like her ability to get back into the fight and counter your turtling. And not be as cheap in terms of like, oh, you see those power generators? I'm gonna pop up in 5 seconds, destroy them, and then be gone before you can send any kind of reinforcement team to kill me. Bye now. Like that's basically how Leviathan plays right now. But he literally just swiper those swipes or like, sneaks behind your stuff, kills something, and then runs. So that's kind of what's pissed people off, I think, for the most part about it. But yeah, anyway, sorry, back to you, Trevor.
That's all right. Another really good question from John Connor here. Ability to capture lieutenants for possible bonuses / unlocks.
We love Monster Hunter. Myself and Michael and Derek, huge Monster Hunter fans. So we might squeeze this into civilian management 1.2, and it's not there on the note page, but something that myself and Michael have wanted to do, and that Derek and I have wanted to do, is the first step is making it to where you can capture special infected, so you can farm DNA. So that way you can keep them in cages like Jurassic Park, for instance. That's why the cages have that huge door on the top. And we haven't introduced the larger cage for the Juggernaut and for like packs of spinners or whatever. But we wanted to make it to where the Sky Crane, you could shrink them. They have a stamina bar. And if you want to go out and hunt them to learn about them, XCOM, basically, you could use that to farm DNA and then go down a research tree of better preparing your units when you fight them. There's less chance of them getting infected. It takes longer for them to turn. What else was there? It reduces the chance of them to be infected to begin with. I'm repeating myself here. Adding it so how long you can stay inside of gas zones via the air filters, like that kind of stuff, to where we want to like kind of bring it round circle in terms of like you could capture them. And the lieutenant is part of that, and Chelsea is part of that. And some people have mentioned they'd love to have the option to non-lethally just take Chelsea and capture her. Like the girl they were holding in Prototype that like Mercer breaks out. I think Mercer breaks her out. Or I think she was about to break out regardless. I haven't played Prototype in like a couple of years, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. That like emo girl that he breaks out in Prototype 1 or whatever. So that's something we want to essentially do, is have it to where you can hold them in containment and learn from them. Oh, is her name Green? I don't know why I got tagged by John Connor. I don't remember her name, but okay. And then that's the spiel there. Essentially getting it to that point, because like you figure 1.2 currently I think only has one thing on it, and it's just civilian management, and that's just civilian evacuations polish, making civilians come up more in greater quantities and balancing out the performance aspects of it on all hardware specs. Automating it so you don't have to sit there and do all the damn work yourself. And then potentially adding in the secret agenda for 1.2 would potentially just be adding in the other cages that Dimitri made, and then pushing in the DNA research. So that way there's a reason to have, DNA. Because right now it's just a lock shredder rounds and GG. You're done. There's nothing else for DNA used for. So that's obviously something we want to do. So it'll be a whole new like DNA button added next to the doctrine button. So you bring it up and it'd be like Plague Inc. is the inspiration we're pulling from, where it's like different things that you could branch down to increase the viability of your units in the field. Little small things. So the virus is not like, it actually has a presence in the world, and it's not just, there's a virus, but we don't really ever do anything with it kind of deal for game stuff. Okay, back to you, Derivar.
Yep. One second, I lost the one that I was at. X-Blaster. For the tunnel boys and finding them, attacking them, why not have different types and tiers?
Tiers?
Yeah, for the tunnel ones, different types and tiers. Oh, turrets.
Oh, he's reading my mind. We already planned on doing that. So for those that don't know, we tend to just discuss stuff in general, chat quite a bit, and it just gets buried sometimes. So like I was explaining to people, is the field turrets the engineers build were never intended to be used in the way they're being used right now. They were supposed to just be like the aliens turret, the second one, about like they're like a pet of the engineer. You can build 2 to 3, and you can basically build them strategically, whether you own the zone or whether you don't own the zone. And there was supposed to be a placeholder so we could basically get a mecha turret in. So there's going to be 2 tiers of turrets that we're going to be designing that are actually supposed to be your base defenses. And we're pulling inspiration from like essentially Prototype and a couple other games, like those really large turrets they have that like just decimate units. And those are going to be the ones that can really, really output and just devastate enemies. And then the field turrets will turn into a minion for the engineer, kind of like the engineer from TF2. That's another parallel. And that way he can build them and place them, and it makes the engineer like a valuable tool to bring in and keep into your fire teams to place down these strategic objects that he can replenish for ammo and pick them up, or just leave them to die and then wait for a cooldown to deploy the next one. And, help you hold a perimeter that you're waiting for reinforcements to come up. You're waiting for little birds to come and extract you, Blackhawks, whatever the situation demands. They're a little more versatile in the field via the engineers with that ability. And then everyone's happy because they get a really good base turret. 2 tiers at least is what we're planning. And they can basically use to defend their bases. And it's not these little puny ones that just, they don't really do much right now. Anyway, sorry. Darren, back to you.
That's right. So from Sergeant Snow here, is there a way to add an early warning sensor, say on the Little Bird or the Black Hawk, similar to what the tugs can detect tunneling infected?
So we plan on doing the Canada Leviathan. It's going to be an upgrade via the DNA research tree, via a weapon loadout configuration you can load on the Blackhawk, because we know one of the most common things people have been asked for is they want weapons on the Blackhawk, they want weapons on the Little Bird. Some of them will be DNA, part cache. Some of them will just be like the assaults. Like it's just a weapon, it's like a Vulcan minigun you can put on the Blackhawk, or missile pods you can put on the Little Bird. But it's just no DNA requirement whatsoever. But like we're planning on just kind of gravitating in that direction. Sooner rather than later, it's just a matter of figuring out when to squeeze all that in. Does that answer your question, Dermar?
Pretty sure that answers it.
Okay.
Another one from X Blaster here. How will the full open world mode work? Since IIRC is, I'm not sure what that means. It is planned at least months ago to have a few maps than a big open world.
So the open world was, maybe there was some wording or some odd writing somewhere that would recause that issue. But the idea is the open world pandemic mode was always supposed to just be a standalone mode, because of miscommunication, I think, on my part, and that the fact that the open world page pandemic screen has multiple like maps that you can choose. I think the idea is that we wanted to allow modders. Well, really, the idea was when we get to that point, modders can make their own small little chunk open world maps that they can share with their friends or communities or whatever. And then we were playing around with the idea that once we get to a certain size of open world, we're going to max out the engine. That there could be a chance that we'd basically just choose another location in the world, expand to that. But for right now, the goal is to just keep on pandemic, develop that, build San Francisco North out, get to San Francisco North, maybe do the South, try and do the Golden Gate area where they had the Planet of the Apes stuff, where they'd go and play with that ape. And then a little bit of the Cove on the right, maybe Oakland, a little bit over there, and then we'd stop on that map because we'd probably maxed out the resources of modern computers, honestly. And then at that point, ideally, if we had the resources, we'd basically go and start working on another map, ideally. But that's not even that's so far out there. We fully plan on this is literally a 5 or 10 year game at this point. So it's we're going to be developing it, improving it, adding things as we're doing other stuff in our lives, regardless, for a very long time. Like Crusader Kings, I forget the name of it. I think it's Solaris as an example. So it's just one of those things where it's going to grow and evolve. And when we get to a point where we decide we can't go any further, that's when we would go with what you're suggesting of adding other maps. But I apologize if we gave the idea that we were going to do that sooner, with just the way the UI was or writing somewhere. And it's more so just a pandemic one, do the campaign after we do all the stuff on the roadmap, and then come back to the pandemic and see if there's a demand to either expand the map if computer resources have gotten better at that point, or to just do a whole new pandemic slice of a different part of the world of the logical story progression of where it's going to go, the next biomes. An idea we were floating around was Los Angeles, or somewhere in like different areas like that. So it's just kind of things that were it's like or like further to the east of San Francisco, so it could start like logically progressing towards the mainland of the United States, deeper into California, going towards the other states. But that'll just come down to resources, time, what people want in terms of what they come to us and are like, hey, we really want you guys to see about expanding it. And we're like, no, we can't because we're going to blow up people's computers. Then at that point, we make a new selection of the map. But yeah, anyway, back to you, Derivar.
Yep. A question from. One moment.
Actually, one more thing to add to that is a
Yep.
compromise me and Michael came up with. And that's the reason why we're doing challenge maps and horde maps, is to give people small little tastes of like, hey, I'm going to play this small little map. I'm going to play like a mission here, and give them something else besides pandemic, besides the campaign that's foreseeably like at least a year out at this point, and just give them a little more content. So theoretically,
More of
horde maps
just,
might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the horde maps are more of like those one-off maps of where it's just a different scenario kind of thing, like to get you out of your comfort zone. It's just the whole idea of it is to kind of separate the difference of design between pandemic and horde mode, is where horde mode has more of a different take on level design, where pandemic mode is set in like a specific general area based off the lore, where horde mode's more of like, okay, I'm in this underground facility on a submarine fighting off hordes of infected type of stuff.
Have
And
fun
that's where
with
we kind of
it.
have, like just kind of have
The
fun with
traditional
it.
skirmishes almost, because the idea is that you're just sitting there, you're defending forever, and you're trying to compete against your friends' scores. And so foreseeably, we're trying to figure out the Steam leaderboard system. So then that way we have it's a little bit complicated of how they document it, at least for me, at least, is to essentially integrate it so that way you can compare against your friends, like their scores, your scores, and be able to have a global leaderboard of competing, like who lived the longest, how many infected did they kill, and that kind of stuff is something we want to do to kind of like expand that and then get the horde maps up to like 5 minimum. So then that way there's enough like side content that they don't want to get into a pandemic mode and play like a 5-hour, 8 longer hour campaign. They just want to play a small little chill, set up some turrets, build some stuff, and just play for a couple, like 20, 40 minutes, see how long they can go. I don't know, like that kind of stuff. Anyhow, sorry, Dervar, I interrupted you. Back to you.
That's right. So a question here from Taragos. I'm sure you answered it already, and I just didn't hear it, but where on the roadmap is adding other gun choices for the operator unit?
So gun choices have pretty much just been, how do I word this? They're not on the roadmap, and generally we don't put the weapons on the roadmap because Michael's really just the grandfather or the brain person for that kind of stuff. Is like he just kind of has a plan out in terms of the weapons, what he wants to put out there, how he wants to do the balance. I think for the factions we have like 20 weapons as an example that's unique to them, like the
Yeah, like
VSS or other crazy
there's a lot
guns.
of weapons that are kind of just floating around. Like a lot of the weapons you guys suggest are kind of already made. It's just there needs to be more units before we can kind of plethora it out there, because a lot of them
I
are
remember
for
saying for
like
Fenrir.
yeah, like some of them are for Finra that are more not sci-fi-ish, but they're more over the top is the best way to put it. Of where they have like two functions, or they're designed to have two functions in mind. But there's at least 40 more weapons are just sitting. It's really just once the factions are more solidified, factions will have more weapons to go around with. It kind of just helps diverse the field a little bit. We kind of did do a CERC thing of where we pulled out a lot of the current weapons for CERC and just kind of replaced and moved around a lot of stuff. Where, like, for instance, the MP5 is now in there, and now we have the MP5 SD, which is more of the 10 millimeter variant. a set of the 9mm. So I mean, there's like things like that that we're kind of playing around with, and that you'll kind of see more of as we start mixing around. Semi-futuristic, not quite modern, but not quite sci-fi.
Well, because like
That is
we're
a quote.
saving. We're saving like some guns are like the F2000 or like some of those like more of those like not futuristic but kind of futuristic guns that look really really wicked for the like the futuristic like Fedra PMC organization, and then like we're saving some of like the broken down older guns for like the anarchists. So we're saving a lot of the police oriented weapons, or at least historically the police oriented weapons like the MP5s and all those for Pierce's group. So there's a lot of weapons that are just literally unique to them, and then you'll see more of those as we just kind of expand upon the game, um as time permits, because like we're always adding in new weapons to CERC. We're tweaking stuff, we're changing weapons, we're trying to find what feels right for everything. I mean, Michael went in and he basically like changed out the weapons and cleaned them up and basically did that recently. So like it's always just a constant moving engine in terms of making sure everything feels right for the weapons, everything feels impactful. But yeah, sorry. Back to you, Dervar.
Yep. I had a question. Where is it? There it is. So something to mixing the subway aquatic idea. Can we add a simple ferry to move between the islands?
Is it an automated ferry or is this one that you control?
I'm not sure. It doesn't say.
Are
Maybe an
you?
automated one.
Did you have the game? Did you have it when it first came out? Whoever asked that question. One of the people that had the game like 2020. That's a funny question because we used to have a system like that.
Maybe. I'm not quite sure.
Who asked the question?
No, an automated, of course. Doesn't snow. They're just.
Oh, okay. So it's funny because when we first released on our Steam Early Access, we didn't have cars, so everything took forever to get around. So our compromise was we had car and we had boat fast travel points when we first released in 2020. And essentially, you would go to one of these docks, you would fire a flare, and then a boat would come, and then it would just put all your troops on there by garrisoning them, and then you would choose a location that you want your units to be deposited at on a different part of the island, and then it would take them to that island, and then it would kick them all off onto the pier. And then we added helicopters, and then we added ground vehicles, and that system was just inadequate, so we got rid of it. But that's a cool idea, actually. Is if we have some kind of thing where, like, if you're really down on your luck, you could theoretically like summon a boat and then tell it to like, or just a schedule or something. I don't know. I'm not against it. It's just we have a lot going on right now. But yeah, no, like that's a cool idea. I do like it. So I'm not gonna give you a yes or a no yet, but I'm gonna say I'm gonna be thinking about that.
Okay.
Back to you, Devar.
Yeah, that's all right. How much time do we have left?
We started late, so I guess just go for another 10 minutes.
All right. Question here from John Connor again. A few quick questions. Amount of players in co-op and prior question before the West Island bridges being destructed. About that. Might be an interesting use of that area. Allows edit here allows an extra area of interest for players without being something extreme. And edit number 2: what is the maximum amount of co-op players in a game you are looking for? Say 2 or 4, or maybe even something like 2 or 8. The small, currently indestructible bridges on the West Island becoming destructible later on.
Michael, were you gonna say
First
something?
off, yeah, I was gonna say Robert has this like hardcore fantasy of 8. Anytime co-ops mention 8, I swear that's the number he always picks. Like when we were talking about like the operator co-op stuff, we were just playing around with the idea of how many people. First number 8, and I'm like, God damn it, man! Like, so anytime
I don't
we
know what
ask
you're
how many
talking about.
how many people can we have playing co-op? 8. Just say 8.
Yeah, say because like it's enough to where you don't have to worry about your friends having a heart attack that they can't play with you. And then 4 always feels so limiting because it always seems like you have more than 4 friends that want to play a game with you. But 8 just feels like a safe number to me. So again, like Michael was
My
saying,
friends. So
I'm sorry, but literally, then you go on Discord and you join a room, and I'll even join and play sometimes when we get to that point and play with random people. So, because we'll probably end up making voice channels like the Division Discord does, where people can just join and make groups. But like, or we make a bot for it of like, hey, I want to join a group, and then it finds people and then just tells them to join a voice channel at a certain time. But like, essentially, it's the preferred number for me is 8. Comes down to technical limitations and how everything falls in the line. The idea is that everyone shares the pop. The main player is the game master, so they can dictate how much pop someone gets. Ideally, by then we would have increased the pop from 80 to something like 120 or higher. It just depends on how well the engine keeps up with all the new systems we're going to be squeezing in to 1.5. And again, it's like you're all just working towards this common goal and just well, really, you guys all just come up with the goal. Like it's like when you play Wastelanders. What do you guys want to do this time? You can just fuck off to an island and just choose not to attack Chelsea at all, and just turtle, and then just come in last minute and try and like do a long, massive offensive. That kind of stuff. It's the idea that it's whatever you want to do, and it's just one campaign, one epic campaign for you and your friends to partake in. Did I answer the question, Derivar, or did I miss something? I didn't hear the full question when you said it earlier.
I think that covers it pretty well.
Excellent.
We don't have anything more from what I can see in podcast questions, but there is something I wanted to ask when you mentioned Fenrir and
He's
their
ready.
weapons.
Yeah.
Would there be chance have the possibility of them when they die drop weapons so we can research them and make up like a shoddy makeshift version of their weapons?
No.
Jesus Christ, Michael.
I think that was the sound of
Currently,
Michael's brain melting.
yeah, currently we don't have a system for allowing units to pick up units of weapons in the field. I mean, it could always be expanded, but right now it's purely just we want to diversify the classes based off of the weapons that they use and the tactics they employ. So there's always the idea is that we were playing around with it, at least for the sub factions. If you ally with them, you could recruit their units and their vehicles. That will not be applicable to the major factions, I think, at this point. But it just kind of comes down to just how things work out. Because at that point, I think they're going to have such a different rig that it'd be a lot of technical considerations to take into mind. But then again, if it's a whole new custom weapon, like the Fallout pipe weapons, theoretically it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's like, I guess you could say feature creep is that like that'll probably be on like the wish list, if not just like the auxiliary list with just everything else that's going on, just to be honest. But it's not a bad idea. It's just that might be an area of development that would work more for a modder to jump in. You know what I mean? Is that like when we get the tools and everything up, it might just be like we don't feel like it would work for us. But if someone wants to go in there and mod that, when we get to the point of releasing a full SDK, fuck yeah, do it. You know what I mean? Like have fun
Yeah.
with it. So but I don't think we'd ever do that in the core. Allowing people to pick up weapons. That's another level of interactivity and cost and complexity, and I don't know. I don't think we'd get to that point because the operator can't pick up weapons. He sees on the floor. He's purely restricted to just going to the barracks and buying it from there at this point. And I think it'll stay that way until either a modder enters the stage, or we just have a lot of free time to the point where we can actually push minor systems like that. Because realistically, that's quality. Well, it's not really quality of life. It's just kind of really cool. But you get what I'm saying. Sorry, back to you.
There is actually a question, within John Connor's question that I actually the 6 or so small bridges on the southwestern island of the square, are they going to be destructible?
All the bridges are going to be destructible.
All of them.
It just like all of them. Like the original idea was to make that bridge, that starting island, you were supposed to be able to control those gates. So eventually we'll come back to that. So you could actually power that gate via a unique structure that you have to hold and then you can quarantine that island because those were supposed to be like an early CERC base they were setting up, and then it got overran because of like screw up on their side. So the idea is that the National Guard, not CERC, is the National Guard set up that wall and some of the other stuff, and then they got overran before you came in. So the idea is that, like, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but on the old starting island, there were these huge blast doors, and they were inspired from Division. Michael. And essentially, the idea was we wanted to make it to where unique structures in the world have rarifications of gameplay in the game of like ammo shops and medical supplies and like ambulances and all that stuff. Have like they can, if you go to them the first time you start a game, you can find strategic resources like in Age of Empires 3 and 2. Like all the Age of Empires have it actually. Those little wolves guard them, and essentially the idea was we wanted to do that. So there's a reason to get out into the world and find all the resources. And when you're in a bind, you know there's an ambulance over the next corner, so you can use that to heal your units if you don't have a medic. Limited stash. And the same thing for that tower, or the same thing for other ideas. We want to have some level of interactivity with the world. If you hold structures you have to hold. And then, obviously all the bridges can go, bye-bye. And part of that, the reason why we haven't rolled it out everywhere is because Chaos Destruction is still beta. And we are terrified of Chaos because of some of the weird things that it does with cost of performance. Because when we switched from physics with Unreal Engine 4 going into Unreal Engine 5, our cost of our characters tripled. And that was part of the reason why people were coming in after the Unreal Engine 5 update, and they were like, what happened to the performance? What's going on? I used to get 60, now I'm getting 30 or 20. So we were forced to stretch more resources out, but I digress, is that essentially we need to wait till Chaos is feature complete, battle tested, more in Fortnite, and other first party, studios have millions of dollars that are working with Epic to improve it, so that we can get that technology for free in an Unreal Engine update, and then implement it into the game, and then slowly but surely scale up. Because you're talking about bridges, I'm talking about signs, wood fences, grenades, cars. They can all destroy them. I want to get to the point like a Company Heroes where if there's environmental damage where even if you're not shooting at someone, you still cause integrity health to come down on the bridge. So I know when you play Company Heroes, like when you destroy a tank on a bridge, it degrades the health of the bridge. So that kind of stuff, really cool stuff where it's it's very immersive is what I want to try and get towards. And then having it to where you can destroy bridge chunks, having it to where you can call in airstrikes and just blow this bridge up. Have a helicopter where you tell it to attack ground instead of having to call in an airstrike and just destroy a chunk of the bridge to save yourself time because maybe you're retreating across the bridge and there's enemies following you and you're like, well, you don't have a repair guy, so screw you. I'm just gonna blow the bridge up, get my units across before I blow it up, and then just now they have to send out an engineer unit or you have to come and build one and get that going. So that kind of combat in terms of basically allowing different gameplay choices to all that fun stuff. But yeah, that answers that question, Derivine.
Xblaster here actually raises a really interesting one. So will that mean if possible you'll want terrain, deformation, destruction, and how it matters?
Terrain deformation of actually adjusting the landscape is something we've looked at. I know a couple I know it's possible. We just haven't been able to allocate the resources from a programming to a technical artist level to just figure that out. So I think when things calm down in the performance is controlled and we'll go back and we'll look at mortars, we'll look at grenades, and we'll see if there's ways that we could make little holes like what Company Heroes does. That's more of a wish list item. It'll probably be way after the actual destruction of environment, the bridges and the gates and the walls and all that. It'll probably be way after all that because that's technically very complicated in terms of adjusting the landscape in real time. But I know it's doable because I've seen tutorials on the YouTube show you how to do it. I've seen other games. I think Astroneer. I think Astroneer is Unreal Engine. Don't quote me on this. I have to go double check. But I know it's feasible. So it's just we have to just find the time to do it, the resources, and just with so much going on right now, it's like that's on my wish list at the end. Actually, I'm gonna put that on the note page. Is landscape deformation, just so that people know we're thinking about it on the TBA section of notes. I'll do that tonight, and some of the stuff you guys mentioned, I'll put on there as well. For like that's stuff that we're thinking about, but we should probably put it on the note page under TBA so people know, like, hey, these are things we want to do. We just don't have the resources yet, or we're waiting until technology is at a point where we can do it. Because a good argument, I forgot about this the other day, is we were talking about Company Heroes, and that back in the day when that game out, Company Heroes 1, nobody's computer could run it. Or if it did, it ran at 20 to 30 frames. But nowadays, we all just kind of bark at it. We're just like, we can run Company Heroes 1 with 120 frames. So it's kind of funny. We're kind of running into those same problems of like, we're trying to leverage the technology versus like making sure people can actually play the game. So it's a very interesting challenge of like, it's kind of funny. History is repeating itself for us, for how it did for them. And hopefully we can just learn from what they did and then apply that into our game design so we can maybe have a little bit less issues early off and build to, like what we're doing, like building a computer. I'm building a computer right now. That's why I keep pausing every once in a while. That's like an i7 4th generation 1060 equivalent video card, 8 gigs of RAM. So I can run the game on there every single build on experimental. So I can make sure people are going to be happy when the build goes out because they're getting it maintenance of 630 frames on minimum spec. So yeah. But that's why we're kind of cautious about rolling out destruction everywhere. That's why we're cautious about rolling out landscape removing everywhere. Because there are costs to everything, and we're just trying to make sure the technology is there, the computers are there, everything is as optimal as possible. That's why we haven't added it so you can remove every single object in the world yet. Because those actually are pretty expensive to remove the cars, remove the landscape, remove the trees. So a couple more months, technology catches up. The Unreal Engine 5 is a little bit more stable. Then we'll start to push those systems behind the scenes, and you'll see them in patch notes here and there randomly, or we'll make a big hoopla about it, or like a AMA thing like today, or just on the announcements. But anyway, back to you, Devar.
Focusing more on the destruction, something I wouldn't mind seeing is the ability to kind of collapse a building.
I hate you. No, we talked about this in that room that one day. It's like, yeah, that'd be totally cool. It's just we would have to model the interior of that entire structure for every structure that supports that. And with only 3 modelers on the entire team, that'd be a long time. So it's like, I guess it comes down to basically like, we're thinking about window dressing of like, you can destroy like chunks of the exterior of the buildings and they fall down. The lights, like sides, like concrete, wood fences, that kind of stuff for like bigger vehicles. Having it with a juggernaut can like destroy cars and Hulk smash them so you can walk on top of them. Because that's a feature of Chaos, is that you can actually deform a vehicle or make it like come down to like a tiny little like Pepsi can. Theoretically, we've seen it on YouTube, so it's doable. It's just a matter of following the tutorials and having the computer resources to do it. But for full building, I think Iron Harvest does that. Is that you figure like it's just something that's on like, again, it's on like the auxiliary wish list feature of like, if we could figure out some kind of revolutionary way of doing it that's humanly possible based off of the budget that we have, because we're indie, we're self-funded, so anything we do has to be leveraged by our monthly sales and how far we can go down the rabbit hole sometimes. And sometimes we have to wait until more backing, more sales, so we can just kind of invest in that kind of technology, bring specialists on that know that area of design better than we do, so we can do it correctly and do it right the first time. Anyway, back to you. Sorry.
I was about to say, I'd be careful mentioning Iron Harvest. There's one defining feature in that game.
What's wrong with that?
Mechs.
I hate you. Anyway.
So we got a last question from X Blaster here. Is improved air support system or anything similar?
Hey, what?
X Blaster asks, improved air support system or anything similar?
Improved air. What do you mean by improved air support system?
Like
Not fully
I'm
under.
guessing like the bombing runs or the helicopters or things like that.
Oh,
Like an
actually, better airstrikes is what you're saying. For the
Yeah,
ones we have now
basically, like-
suck. Yeah, they do suck. So you figure, yes, that's on our list. It's just we did some of the doctrinal changes of just improving well, not even doctrinal changes. We did some of the base building improvements of like the medium towers and the light towers and all that stuff, and then we're gonna add in a mine thrower vehicle and get rid of the individual mines, so you can just tell it to saturated area. That's part of that, is being able to get to that point of like we want to handle the doctrine changes and the base building changes, or like a revision of it to just kind of make it less tedious to play the game, like to place individual mines at the same time. I don't have any TA for that just yet, but we plan on changing the Thunderbolt so it does the brrr thing. We plan on actually adding in better airstrikes and actually going down a doctrine tree of expanding, because we want to double the doctrine tree. We want to add more stuff there. And as it stands right now, it's just kind of lackluster. Some of the airstrikes we have, they work functionally, they kill stuff, but it's not the kind of effects that we want. And because we've been such on a march to get the performance and to get the roadmap caught up, we haven't been able, like the factions or like the civilian management and all the time that goes into making all those systems and the models, and we haven't had the time to kind of focus on those systems. But we're thinking about them all the fucking time. About like, when can we squeeze in one thing? Like the light and scout tower was like one of those things where I just squeeze it in regardless because people wanted towers so badly. And the same thing with the medium one. And then eventually I'll probably squeeze in one more thing from that list, and then another thing, until we can just focus on it in its entirety of a solid 2 weeks, a solid 3 weeks to just redo all the particle effects for the airstrikes with Niagara, redo the some of the like the boring systems, like placing individual mines versus placing like, saturating a field with mine, being able to make a minefield via that minefield vehicle that they have. You can just go on YouTube. You can YouTube it. I think I sent it to Suki and a couple other people. It's like basically like a vehicle that shoots out mines and it drives on left, the side, and the back, and then that way you can just staff that vehicle to an area, and then it will just come back and redeploy them when it gets low, to kind of help you like set up no man's land, or like an early detection space of like a zone where you don't want civilians coming through or infected coming through. You say hello to them to the mind way, I guess. But yeah, that's the goal. Back to you, Dervar.
Instead of a sign saying caution mines,
Oh,
have a
but we should
sign
actually
saying
add that as a
civilians this
buildable
way.
item for a memeable. Yeah, we should probably do that. That'd be cool. Or have them dynamically placed. So when you zone an area, it would put those signs on the borders of the area. And then that way it'd be like danger mines. And it has like that one they use, and they still use it in some World War II areas, because there's still mines blowing up to this day, as far as I know. And they have those little like danger mines, like blah blah blah, like a little biohazard symbol, whatever the symbol they use. So we could probably do that and have them placed dynamically based off of the box area that you zone as a minefield. But anyhow, back to you.
Wouldn't it be a bit conflicting if you put a minefield sign down and then put a sign that attracts civilians towards it inside
That's
the
your
middle of the
prerogative. I'm
minefield?
not going to judge you.
Civilians, come this way
Theoretically,
if you want free foot massages.
theoretically, you could put a sign there in the middle of the minefield, and then just say the welcome mode, and it'll just grab nearby civilians and run them into the minefield on constant loop forever. And then the minefield thing would just go out and keep placing mines every time they're depleted. So it'd be like an endless loop of destruction. But eventually, you would start to attract the infected because the mines will be a neutral sound. So there's a pro and a con. If you're going to keep doing that, you're going to attract the attention of everyone. The long-term ramifications is Pierce is going to hit guts to where basically he'll attack you constantly. He'll get all the civilians in the entire map to hate you because he'll vassalize them. And then you'll have thousands of people, not only infected, not only the Fenrir when we get to that point, but you'll have thousands of people that want to shoot you every time you fly over their neighborhoods, every time you go down their streets. So you'll have an insurrection, basically, or an insurgency, to where doing anything will be a nightmare. So theoretically, if you want to be a dick like that, we're going to counteract that But literally, the people will rise up and literally make you going through their neighborhoods a living hell. So either you'll have to go back in good standings with them via diplomacy system, or kill everyone via firebombing. So good luck. That's all I gotta say. Because theoretically, if you use a killing everyone route, and then you're gonna have your game is gonna inflate substantially in terms of just getting the Chelsea, means you have to literally go on like flamethrower runs, bombing runs, just to get the Chelsea, and then you'll have depleted resources when you finally get to her. So overall, you're
free
weakening
target
yourself. I guess you can use it as a way to level up your units, but at the same time, you're gonna lose people because it's gonna be that random guy that's sitting up on a building with a sniper rifle that's gonna one hit your units, and then you won't. And then you'll lose you might lose winters, you might lose your heavy because they're gonna prioritize based off of threat of which unit in a group is the most deadly, and you can bet we're gonna put the radio men at one of the highest threat levels. If they're not in combat, the factions will attack your radio man to isolate your ability to call in airstrikes, and then start picking off the rest of your units while you're trying to reorganize and figure out where the pot shots are coming from. So that's the idea, is that if you're going to be a dick to the civilians, they're going to dick you back just as hard. It is the idea. Yeah, that's the idea, because it might be cool if, like, haha, I got them all, like, but then again, when you have a convoy, you're going through a city, they're going to ambush you. Like, they'll just literally just jump up from the buildings and start shooting all your guys, and you'll start losing convoys. Like, everyone. And then the idea is that we want to have it to where they have armor-piercing rounds, especially the anarchists, so they'll shoot your drivers via a special ability, steal your vehicles, and then use them for resources. So you come back and you can't even get your striker back. It's gone. They stole it. So it's like, that's the idea, is that 1.3, so 1.2 will introduce the civilian aspect of them screwing you over if you're going to consistently be a dick to them. And then 1.3 will tie that in with the factions to where Pierce will hit you as well. And then you have a police faction that's hunting for you. And then towards the end of 1.3, Natalie doesn't give a damn what you do, because she's like the neutral, chaotic, whatever. So theoretically, if you kill the civilians and you're killing the factions, the Pierce, you could just ally with her and just get her to send out suicide bombers to their neighborhoods. So, I mean, that's the idea, is building it to that point. In the next 3 versions, is the game's going to change substantially into, like, running through an empty neighborhood. It's just going to be like, la, la, la. Now it's going to be like bullet holes in all your strikers. I guess a good example is Black Hawk Down when they're leaving. And those people and the Afghans are like the African soldiers are still like chasing after them and shooting them everywhere they go. And I guess that's a good comparison. Is like, or like when they're driving the Humvees to the town, that's going to be you guys if you keep killing everyone. It's literally everyone's just going to be popping up, and you're going to have warfare every block, unless you turn off advanced civilian management. Then at that point, they won't respond. If people don't want to deal with those systems of an insurrection or insurgency everywhere you go, it will turn it off. We'll have advanced civilians still a thing, so you can turn it off if you don't want to engage. But if you do, well, good luck. That's all I got to say to you. Good luck. But anyway, sorry, Jeremy, back to you.
That's all right. I think that's all we have time for, isn't it?
Yeah, because I have to go work on the operator. I have my energy drink ready. If you can hear that, the sound of the chiming of metal, and I need to get on the operator, finish up the remaining systems, fix some bugs, and get another experimental out tonight. Because I believe there's some more performance improvements that we did last night that needed. Some of them went out in the midnight. In the patch we put out at 5 a.m. this morning as a hotfix, whatever, to fix the issues that were from the first experimental patch. And then there's another one coming out tonight, and most likely another one coming out Friday, because we're hauling ass to get the performance where it needs to be. And I'm waiting for a component to come so I can fully set up my low-end computer, so then my minimum spec computer, so that I can get that operational the next 24 hours, so that we can push it even further going into over the weekend, Monday, Tuesday. So hopefully we're done with performance by Tuesday-ish, and then we could go into medium Atlas Tower, the weapon wheel, like the weapon description thingy, and then potentially another horde map, depending on if Michael's dying in the corner, and then directly into 1.2 for civilian management. Because at that point, if we're able to fix the performance issues, we've satisfied the requirement of normalizing out the game's performance after 5 to 8 days. when it starts to go off the rails. And again, please, 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 anyone that's listening on YouTube, anyone that's on Discord, if you get a save file and you're on between the minimum spec and the recommended spec or above, and your performance is lackluster, send it to us. Put it on Steam. Upload it to Google Drive, OneDrive, whatever your drug is, Dropbox. Send it to us, because then we can take that same file, and if it immediately loads up and you have that performance, that is a godsend to basically allow us to get in there really quickly, figure out what's going on crazy, and resolve it. So that way we can tell you in the next patch, next time you load that save file, you're going to get 30 to 60 frames again. Because sometimes some of these things are so, like, we don't play that way. We don't build these areas. That it's like, we don't think of this combination of units. Then we see it and we're like, what? Why is it doing that? And then we run the tool and it's like these combination of actors with these systems running and this cause the issue. So it's just something to be aware of, because we can't always test everything. So, because we're like literally 6 to 7 people, depending on the day, sometimes 5 that work on the game if like people are busy at their day jobs. So yeah. So Dervon, do you want to do the X show, or am I doing the X show?
I can do it.
All you.
Or me. Anyway, I'd like to extend a thank you to everyone for coming and watching us here today on the podcast. If you'd like to support the continued development of Cepheus Protocol, we do have a Patreon. Do you have a link to that, Robert, that you can post?
Oh yeah, I'll post it.
Cool. And they also have a merchandise store. If you'd like to own a T-shirt or something with Cepheus Protocol on it. So yes, so thank you all very much for coming in, sharing your very nice questions, and we shall catch you all next time.
Indeed. The actual, if anyone that's curious is watching on this stream, if you go into the FAQ and roll section on Discord, you can see a link to our Patreon. Because we don't have a publisher, we don't have a funding party. Our development is based off of monthly sales, so we're just trying to push other ways of raising money, so we can develop a better game, bring more people on, and get it out quicker to you guys. So that's the biggest reason why we run a Patreon, because we're trying to do so many things. We're such an ambitious team, and typically we need a lot of money to do that. So we gate ourselves sometimes monthly of what we can do, what we can bring on, what we can X, Y, and Z, because we can look at our sales and we're like, okay, we need to scale back to make sure we're not going negative this month, X, Y, and Z. So again, just the reality of the situation. But thank you guys for coming, and we really do appreciate the time you guys take to find bugs, to come into the room and talk to us, and to no bullshit tell us like, hey, we don't like these systems. We like these systems, X, Y, and Z. As long as it's done in a respectful manner, we love it. We have no problem with it. So it's the same thing with that. So thank you guys so much.